Okay, good morning, all of you. So let's get started with today's class. Before we start, I just want to ask, are there any questions or doubts regarding the assignment that I had given, the MATLAB assignment?
So it's, in MATLAB, or the ordinary MATLAB tool is that we have to use, right?
Yeah, normal
Because
MATLAB tool, you just need to write a .m file, basically the
okay,
normal, yeah? Yeah,
okay,
no need
okay,
to use any toolbox or anything like that.
okay.
Okay, I hope you guys have started. So if not, please do start. Don't wait till the last minute. Submission deadline is 30th and I will not be extending it. Okay, so it's a very simple exercise. So please do finish that, because once you are done with it, I will give you the next assignment as well. Okay, which will then merge into your project. All right, so let's start with today's class. So today we will start looking at an entire class of data converters, which is called as oversampled data converters. Now the ADCs that we have seen till now, they are what are called as Nyquist rate ADCs, which means that if the maximum signal in your input, whatever you are trying to digitize, if the maximum signal is, let's say, f naught, then then the sampling rate is going to be the Nyquist rate, which is 2 times f naught. Okay, and according to Nyquist theorem, we know that if you can sample at twice the highest frequency, you'll be able to perfectly recover whatever was there at the input. Now, in order to kind of take care of some of the out of band interferers or out of band noise and other things, you might want to slightly, increase your sampling frequency slightly above the maximum frequency, so that you kind of give a little room for the filter roll off and things like that. So they all come under the category of Nyquist rate ADCs. Okay. But today we will start off with another class of data converters, which is called as the oversampled data converters. Okay. Now, before we start off with that, there is just one point that I wanted to cover with respect to the strong arm latch, which is basically kickback noise and supply transients. Okay. Now, what is kickback noise? Uh, Let me draw the input section of our strong arm latch. Following the same convention as the previous class, let's say this was M1, this was M2, and this was your V in P, this was V in M. Let's call this as M7, right? This is the input section of your strong arm latch. Okay. Now, what do we mean by kickback noise? So this is the noise which happens when your clock transitions uh, up or down, and also when your the latch resolves to either VDD or ground. So we have kept the name of these two nodes as P and Q, right? Now, what do we mean by kickback noise? That is, you are feeding the input like this, right? You're writing the analog differential input, or rather the discrete time differential input, to the gate capacitance of these two transistors M1 and M2. But because of the switching that happens in this latch, see, digital circuits are very, aggressive circuits, if you can call them that, right? Because they have fast transitions, and they transition to the supply rates VDD or ground. So you have fast transitions, fast large voltage transitions happening in any digital circuit. Okay, and this is a quasi digital circuit. Okay, and you here also you see that there are large voltage fast transitions, right? So when that happens, there is going to be that noise being fed back to the input. So let's see what are the mechanisms. For example, first, let's say the clock, rising edge of the clock. So when your clock goes high, right, what happens? Now this transistor starts to draw current. Where is the current going to come from? Right. So these two nodes are at VDD, right? And you have, by raising the clock voltage, this node basically falls down, right? Now as it goes down, where is the current going to come from? I mean, the capacitor will have to start discharging, but you also have capacitors here, right? The CGS of 1 and CGS of 2, correct? So because of this clock transition, some portion of the current flowing through M7 is also going to come through these two capacitors, okay? And the exact proportion of the current will all depend on the driving point impedance and things like that. But nevertheless, we can safely say that there is going to be some current which is going to come when the when M7 turns on. Initially, the current is going to come. The drain current of M7 initially is going to come from these two capacitors. Okay. Now, where are these two capacitors going to get the current from? Right. They are going to get it from the source, right? You will have some any source, any driving buffer can be modeled as a voltage source with a series resistance. That's the way we model any source, right? So this current is basically going to come like this, correct? And therefore, what is important is it also depends on the driving source impedance, correct? And because you're drawing current from here, what will happen? And this is a very sharp transition. Yeah, your clock transitions are quite sharp, right? So there will be, if you look at the current which is fed from here, it will basically be like, you know, you have a spike of current which is coming. Now, because of the spike of current which is being drawn from the source, what will happen to the voltage at these 2 points, or rather what will happen to the voltage at these 2 points? You will basically see a glitch like this. Understood, right? So although I have modeled here as a voltage source with a series resistance, in practice, what is it? It's basically some transistor, right? Some output buffer, maybe a common drain or something like that is there, or a class AB amplifier, something like that is there, which is driving this this thing. Or for that matter, if you talk about an op amp, your second stage of the op amp, or maybe you put a common drain output stage, right? So that transistor is going to drive this capacitance CGS1, CGS2, correct? And that current will basically cause a glitch at the input. For example, let's say this is your buffer going to your comparator. Now, if you look at the voltage at this node, let's say it is like this, it will basically have a small glitch. Okay, these are what are called as kickback noise or kickback transients. Okay. Now, because both M1 and M2, the differential voltage is not too off, like, I mean, let's say the differential voltage is small, we can safely say that this is a common mode noise or transient. Okay, that is both your plus and minus sees pretty much similar amount of glitch here. Okay, all right, and this is because of this thing. Okay, now what else can happen? So same way, what happens when the clock goes off? when the clock is going to go off, right? So there also you will have coupling through the CGD of this capacitance and through this one. Okay, so this coupling will be there. So probably when the clock is going off, it may not affect so much, but still you will see a small glitch. All right, because there will be capacitive coupling, which is what we call as clock feed through. Okay. Now the second mechanism by which you have glitches at the input is because of the unequal fall rates of P and Q. Okay. So if you have a fairly good amount of differential voltage, these voltages Vp and Vq are going to fall at different rates, which is what we saw in the previous class. Okay. Now because they are going to fall, and after that one node is going to go towards VDD and the other is going to go to ground, right? So this particular, or at least one of them, Vp and Vq will not go to VDD, right? Vx and Vy will go to VDD and ground, right? Vp, Vq will fall towards ground at unequal rates. Okay. Now you know that there is a CGD also, which is coupling here, right? Now, although in the class I drew them as slowly varying transients, that is actually a kind of a blown up or a zoomed in view, right? If you look at the time scales, it will be in the order of some tens of picoseconds, right? So it is actually a very fast transition. Now that will also get coupled through the CGD, and that will also form glitches at the input. Okay, and because of the unequal rates, one side will have a bigger glitch than the other side. All right, so this contributes to what is called as differential mode noise. Okay, the noise that is coming because of the rising edge of the clock is common mode. But because of the unequal fall rates of P and Q due to the differential input, that will cause a differential mode noise, because one node is falling very fast and the other node is falling a little slower, right? So you have unequal coupling through CGD, which will basically have an unequal glitch at the input of these two these two inputs. Okay, so this is what is called as kickback noise, and this is a fairly severe thing. So people do try to take care of it. In fact, if you don't have a proper this thing, like if you are not isolating things properly, it can even propagate to your sample and hold. Okay, so that is how things work. Okay, because these are very fast changing, rapidly transitioning edges, the coupling is also quite high. Okay, which is why it is important to minimize CGS and CGD, which would make that W1 and W2 be lower to minimize CGS and CGD. Okay, which obviously we know that this is the opposite thing of trying to minimize offset. In order to minimize offset, you will blow up the area. By blowing up the area, you will have significant amount of CGS and CGD, which will worsen this problem. Okay, so always there are trade-offs. Okay, now there is also what is called as supply transients. Okay, now what is supply transients? So let's say you have this comparator, right? You have the VDD line and you have the ground line. Okay, now this VDD line and ground line is going to have some small resistance, small inductance. Okay. Now this will of course be a distributed parameter, but let's try to understand what happens. Now what will be the current drawn by this supply? Let's say IVDD. You will not have current during pre-charge. Okay, during pre-charge maybe just a little bit of current you will have to charge everything to VDD, right? And after that, what will you have? You will not have any current, right? The clock edge comes and the regeneration happens, you will have a spike, right? So basically, if you look at the current waveform, it is basically going to look like a highly spiky waveform. Okay. In fact, this will be one of your assignments which you will be designing, and also one group is going to do a project on designing the strong arm latch, and you can easily you will be able to plot the current. Okay. And you can see that the current is extremely spiky and glitchy. All right. Now let's say this is VDD, which is a DC voltage, let's say 1.2 volt. Now what will be the voltage here? Let me call it VDD prime. Now what is VDD prime? VDD prime is nothing but VDD minus IVDD times R minus L times D IVDD by dt. Correct. So what you will see is this VDD prime is going to look like, something like this, right? And the faster the transitions, right, the more spiky it becomes, the current. And if di by dt becomes large, then you have a larger voltage drop. Okay, so which is why the supply voltage itself will be swinging. Okay, same way what happens, this current whatever is flowing here is has to flow through ground, right? So if you look at this current, the same current is flowing through this ground line, and therefore this ground line will also be, instead of being 0, let's say this is G and D, let me call this as G and D prime. So instead of being absolutely at 0, you'll have some spiky kind of ground. Okay. And in addition, of course, if there are other blocks which consume a constant current, you will have some additional constant offset also. Okay. So this is what is called as supply transients. Okay. This is sometimes called as ground bounce. Okay. That is to say that your ground is actually not a constant 0 volt ground. Your ground is actually going to bounce around. Okay. So this, once you do a layout, so usually where will you get these things? Okay. In schematic you will not see anything. In schematic, when you put a direct DC voltage source directly connected to your supply, you will see clear 1.2 volt, because an ideal voltage source can supply any amount of current. But the moment you do layout, which you will be doing in this course, okay, hopefully, and what happens is you will see that all these metal bars are going to have some resistances, right, and small inductances, right, and capacitance to ground. So all these things are going to come into the picture. Okay, so which is one reason why for these, I mean, this is typically there in all digital circuits. Okay, and especially in a latch like this where you have regeneration, it will be even more. Okay, now what happens is, in order to kind of mitigate this problem, to kind of reduce the impact of this problem, you put what is called as supply decoupling capacitors or supply bypass capacitors. Okay, these are called as supply decoupling caps or bypass caps. Okay. Now in a good design, what you would do is you will try to put some, of course it may not be always possible, but at least in the IC, when you at the top level layout, you will try to put these supply bypass capacitor as close as possible to your switching circuits. Okay. And what is the job of this capacitor? The job of this capacitor is basically to source this switching current. Okay. The switching current, if you look at there are two ways to understand it, right? The capacitor's voltage will not instantaneously vary, right? So what it will do is it will try to maintain the voltage constant as possible. Okay. Another viewpoint from the frequency domain perspective is to say that the high frequency current, so this kind of a glitchy current has a very large amount of high frequency content if you look at the spectrum of this current. Okay. So that current is basically going to get circulated like this. Okay. The high frequency current gets circulated through this bypass capacitor, and so the current which is actually drawn from the external thing. So let's say you have, this is the border of your chip, right? If you look at the border of the chip, this inductor will be basically your bond wire inductance and other trace inductance, PCB trace inductance, all these things will be there, okay? So which is why you will have some bypass capacitance on the chip. And also if you look at some of these mixed signal ICs, okay, I don't know if you have done PCB design, right? If you look at these mixed signal ICs, ADCs, DACs, ICs, they will tell you, the data sheet will give you an application note, and they will tell you if you have a VDD line, put a capacitor as close as possible to the pin of the IC, right? And then you will have one more capacitance close to the actual supply pin, okay? So this is basically to take care of RFI, EMI, right? And this is basically to take care of, this is basically a supply decoupling cap, okay? So inside the chip itself, they will have a good amount of supply bypass cap, but that is not comparable to what you can put off chip, okay? In on chip, you can put some, tens of picofarads of capacitance, right? And this can be a MOS capacitance, so you'll have pretty good density, but off chip you can always come up with, this will be some 10 microfarad capacitance or 1 microfarad capacitance or 100 nanofarad capacitance. So larger values will be used, okay? So all this is because you want to suppress this supply noise, okay, or supply transients, okay? And this is especially the case when you have digital circuits, which is why if you see many of these mixed signal ICs, I would encourage you to just go to Texas Instruments website or Analog Devices website, look at any of their A to D converters, okay? Take any ADC or any DAC and look at its data sheet. Just go through its data sheet, see what are all the things that are there, okay? And you will see that they'll have a separate analog VDD and they'll have a separate digital VDD, okay? Ultimately at the board, they will all be connected together. So for example, if this is A VDD, this is D VDD, you will have a separate capacitance, okay? And then here they will all be joined together, all right? But you make sure that, at least you put all these decoupling capacitors and try to clean up your supply as much as you can, okay? So this is how you will basically see. You can also look at their typical application circuit. It will be really a good exercise for you to go through any one of the data sheets, all right? Okay. Any questions, any doubts? All right.
No.
So now let us move to the oversampling data converters or oversampled, okay? Now, what is the fundamental reason why we go for oversampled data converters? Okay. So let us take a look at the quantization noise. Now, what is the quantization noise? What is the quantization noise power? PQ, let me call it. Oops. If let's say VLSB can be written as del, what is the quantization noise power? Exactly. It is del squared by 12. Now, what is the spectrum of the quantization noise power? Let's say this is 0, this is the f-axis. What is the spectrum? It will be a flat, we haven't looked at it, is it? Like it will be a flat spectrum. So did we look at the PST of the,
Yes.
yeah, PDF we
PDF.
looked at, right? And power spectral density also we do. Okay, the PDF is a uniform distribution between minus del by 2 to plus del by 2. That is the probability density function, okay? But if you take the noise power spectral density, you will see that this is also flat, okay? Because there is no reason to favor one frequency over the other, whatever be the input frequency, the noise is going to be the same, right? So this will range from Fs by 2 to minus Fs by 2, correct? Now, what will be the amplitude of this? How will we find the amplitude?
1 by
1 by?
Fs.
Why 1 by
Fs.
Fs? This is not PDF. In PDF, yeah, this is the
Oh,
power
okay, okay.
spectral density. This is the quantization noise power spectral density. Right. Now we can always say that the noise in the time domain is the power in the time domain is equal to the power in the frequency domain. Right? What is that theorem called as? Parseval's theorem, right? Yeah, Parseval's theorem, what
Yes,
does
sir.
it say? It says that the energy in the time domain is equal to the energy in the frequency, or power in the time domain is equal to the power in the frequency domain, right? So basically we know that the total integrated quantization noise is del squared by 12. What is the total integrated noise from this frequency domain? It is some, let's say, k times Fs, right? So what is your k here? It is nothing but del squared by 12 Fs. So the amplitude of this one is nothing but del squared by 12 times Fs. Okay. So this is your noise power spectral density, quantization noise power spectral density. Now let me give you another scenario. Okay. I am using the same quantizer. All right. But now I am using Fs1, which is, let's say, some m times Fs. Same input, same quantizer. Okay. The bandwidth of the input signal is the same. Let's say it is Fs by 2. All right. But I'm, instead of sampling it at Fs, I'm going to sample it at some m times Fs. Okay. Now, how will the power spectral density look like? Of course, we know that it is going to be like this. So it is going to be from Fs1 by 2 to minus Fs1 by 2, correct? What will be the amplitude of this noise? Or what is the y-axis value? What is the power spectral density?
Del square by 12
Correct.
Fs.
So
1.
this value is going to be what? Del squared by 12 Fs1. Now comparing this value with the previous one, if I write, okay, let me, yeah, del squared by 12 Fs1 and del squared by 12 Fs, which will be greater? Second one will be greater,
Second one.
right? So if I overlay both of them, right, it's going to be something like this. Let's say this is f minus Fs by 2 to plus Fs by 2, and this value is del squared by 12 Fs. All right. So suppose I do this oversampling. Okay, this m is nothing but my oversampling ratio. All right. By oversampling, what I have done is I have reduced the power spectral density value. Only thing is the total amount of the noise is the same. It is still del squared by 12, right? The total integrated quantization noise power is the same. But all what I have done is I have distributed over a larger frequency range. Okay. Now comes the twist. Now after sampling like this, okay, after sampling like this, I am doing the quantization. Okay, let me draw it as a block diagram. Let's say this is my sample and hold, and this is at m times Fs. Okay, and then I have my quantizer. Okay, I have my digital bits. Correct. Now in the digital domain, I am going to put a low pass filter. Okay, and the What is the bandwidth of my low pass filter? This is going to be Fs by 2. Okay. What will happen? First of all, can I put a low pass filter like this? Is it valid for me? I mean, let's say this low pass filter is a digital implementation. Let's say it's an FIR filter or an IIR filter. The implementation can be anything. Okay. Am I allowed to put something like this? I can put, right? Because my input signal bandwidth is Fs by 2, right? There is nothing else beyond Fs by 2. Okay. My anti-aliasing filter before this, let me call it AAF, anti-aliasing filter band is basically Fs by 2 only. So it has cleared out everything beyond Fs by 2, right? But instead of sampling it at Fs, I am doing it at m times Fs, or in other words, let me call it as OSR times Fs, where OSR is nothing but the sampling rate, actual sampling rate divided by the Nyquist rate. Okay. In this case, OSR is m. We will be encountering this factor called as OSR, which just stands for oversampling ratio. Okay. And I'm quantizing it. And after quantization, what I'm doing, I'm using a digital filter, an FIR filter or an IIR filter, a low pass filter, to take only this thing. So in other words, what I'm basically doing is I am taking this like this. Now, do you think I have an advantage or not? And let's say after this, I can, decimate it, right, down by a factor of OSR. So now I will have digital bits at data rate at Fs. Correct. Now, by doing this, do you think I have some advantage or not? Yes or no?
Less quantization power.
Exactly, right? What has happened is, earlier I had, let me say, this was my, earlier I had larger amount of quantization noise, right? So my SNR was higher, but because of what I have done here, which is basically what I have done is oversampling followed by filtering and decimation. What has happened here is I have improved my SQNR. Correct. It is obvious to see here because now the after oversampling, now the oversampling power spectral density, noise power spectral density is now del squared by 12 OSR times Fs, right? And now the actual quantization noise power after filtering, okay, let me call it as PQ filtered, right, is going to be what? Minus Fs by 2 to plus Fs by 2 del squared by 12 OSR Fs df. Correct. Now, what will this evaluate to? Del squared by 12 OSR are constants. Fs is also a constant, right? You will have Fs by 2 minus plus Fs by 2. You will basically get Fs. So, what is it that you are having? Del squared by 12 OSR. Correct. Now, what is the SNR improvement that you are getting? The SNR, if you write the SNR, let's say A squared by 2, or the peak signal power remains the same, right? And the SNR improvement is how much?
OSR times.
SNR improvement is OSR. In other words, in dB, SNR improvement in dB is going to be what? 20 log times of OSR. Okay. So if OSR is 2, that is you are sampling at double the frequency, what are you going to get? What is log of 2? I mean 20 log of 2, 6 dB. In SNR, correct? Right. So just by doing this, you're basically getting what is 6 dB improvement? What is SQNR formula? 6.02 n plus 1.76. In other words, it is like almost saying that 1 bit improvement per doubling of frequency. Okay, so you're going to improve the resolution of your ADC by 1 bit if you can do what? Oh, sorry, it's 10 log OSR because we are talking about, sorry about that. Yeah, it is 10 log OSR because you are going to have, I mean, it is signal to noise, right? And this is the noise power that we are talking about. So it will be 10 log of this. So 10 log will be 3 bit, which is basically 0.5 bit improvement per octave increase in FS. All right. So that is to say, if you take an 8-bit ADC and you do this, increase the sample rate and do decimation later, you are going to get half a bit improvement if you just double the sampling rate. All right. Now these oversamples, so this is a very simple thing and nobody uses this because by nature we are quite greedy. We want to take more than this, right? We want to have more improvement than what can be achieved with this, right? So how to do that? That is what we end up with, what is called as delta sigma modulators. Okay. The simple concept of delta sigma modulators is I am not content with only the overall concept is this. Okay. So you have your sample and hold, which is operating at OSR times Fs, right? And you have your quantizer, but now in the quantizer, you have quantizer plus some feedback, which will shape the noise. Okay. So which means that instead of getting that small half a bit per improvement, by just doubling the sampling frequency, you will get even more improvement. Then from here you go to the same thing. You get a low pass filter and basically you decimate it by a factor of OSR. Okay. So this is the basic concept of delta sigma modulators. Okay. Instead of just putting a normal quantizer, we are going to throw a feedback loop around the quantizer. And because of this feedback loop around the quantizer, we will see how noise gets shaped, okay, which is called as noise shaping. And because of the shaped noise, you are going to get even more improvement in your SQNR. Okay, and this is the basic underlying fundamental concept of your delta sigma modulator. Okay, now that I told you that we are going to throw a feedback loop around our quantizer, so let us look at a very simple feedback loop. Okay. Now, how can you kind of conceptualize or mathematically model quantizer? Quantizer can be modeled as an additive error, or rather, let me just say quantization noise can be modeled as an additive error. Okay, it's not a multiplicative error, it's an additive error. Okay, so you can say that if you have a quantizer, right, this is your input signal, this is your quantization error, and this is your VQ of n, let's say E of n, Vn of n. Okay, so this is a very simple model of your quantizer because that is exactly what is going to happen, right? So for example, if if your input is, let's say, 0.62 volt, right? And let's say your nearest step is 0.5 volt, or rather the lower thing, the quantization error is 0.12 volt, right? So you can, or rather minus 0.12 volt. So you can think of Vq of n as V in of n minus E of n. Okay. Minus E of n, or you can say error is additive in nature and you just flip the sign of your error. Okay. So however you want to look at it. All right. So this is how you can model a quantization noise. Of course, this E of n is not a constant. E of n depends on the input. Okay. Now let's throw a small feedback loop around this. Okay. What is a small feedback loop? Let's say we take an op amp. Okay, and we put this quantizer. Okay, so this is a typical way to denote a quantizer. Okay, let's say we put a unity gain feedback loop. Okay, so this can be modeled as what? This can be modeled as an op amp with an additive error. Okay, let's just say plus E. Okay, plus E of n. So let's say this is V in of n and V out of n. Okay, but we also know that this is not exactly the case, because when you talk about quantization, there is always a clock which is involved, and you can get the quantized output only after one clock delay, right? You don't, it's not an analog circuit. You will get this thing only after one clock cycle delay, correct? So what we will do is we will add Z inverse here. Okay, I mean you can add the Z inverse there also. That's fine, right? So all what we are saying is the comparison is going to happen after one clock delay. Okay, so now that this has become a